All right. Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Haut Bois Talk Show. And by way of introduction, I'm Daniel.
And I'm Tamsin.
And our guest today is Adeliia Faizullina, Adele. And we're so glad that you're here. Um, I guess Tamsin and I have known you for about 2 years now. And we met in LA. And I every week we ask people to talk about what they do and kind of define their practice in music. And so we want to ask you the same question. What do you feel
How would you?
how would you describe what you do?
Oh, hi all. And first of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to talk about what I do. So I am Adele. I am a composer. I am also a vocalist, multi-instrumentalist. I play a couple of instruments. I often improvise on those toys that I have even around me right now. So yeah, I was born in Uzbekistan, and then majority of my life I spent in Tatarstan, and I have a lot of Asian influence, Asian culture influence in my life. And I am Tatar. I speak Tatar, and then I speak Russian. So this is kind of some of my background. So um, if to talk about the way I approach the process of composing, often for me it's a type of improvising with instruments, with the
Mm,
sounds, and then I say it's often um, uh, brain improvisation. It's like,
mm,
you know, getting ideas out of your head and often not like thinking and analyzing, more just being a channel for yourself,
mm,
and hearing what you hear in the moment. And then next time you won't be the same, and you won't get the same train of thoughts and ideas and flashes in your head, like of sounds and um, environments. So and that seems to me fascinating, just to catch the moment, and that's beautiful. Even you can get worse ideas and then better ideas next time, but
yeah.
this is about the moment.
Do you
So
have sort of
um,
do you have sort of a ritual or like a place that you like? Do you like sit yourself down to brain improvise, or do you do it like when you're like waiting for a train? You know, you have a particular like work environment that you do well, that you do best in.
it's the combination. So I like to set up a space for me, like a quiet space. I notice like the sounds from outside. If someone is talking, that is distracting to me. So I like to
Mm,
be in a quiet space. And it's in a way meditative, because um, the longer you are in that environment and thinking about something, like more you get on deeper and you forget about things that may distract you.
mm,
um, so, and then even maybe I may not notice things happening around. So that's cool. I like when it happens, actually.
mm,
But then I cannot stop myself thinking. Sometimes outside, like still I think about those ideas if they really draw my attention before in my quiet space. So I continue kind of going back to that um, mentally. And so something may come out and um, give me an idea. Yeah, when I'm on at the train station or somewhere with people, I just watch myself sometimes, like, oh, I just stopped like being there and went to that
Yeah,
space again that I was before in my quiet
yeah,
environment. Yeah,
mm.
it's
definitely.
pretty.
experience too. Have you ever, this is sort of another random question, but have you ever had a large project that you're sort of in the middle of and you like can't kind of get it out of your mind and you end up like working on it in your dreams? Sort of wonder if
Yeah, yeah, that happens too. That happens too. Yeah.
very
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. It's interesting. One of the things you said was that, you kind of need to get in a space where you can focus on the sound and your improvisation very seriously. And I feel like one of the pieces we wanted to talk about today kind of has that quality to it. Maybe we can look at Tatar folktales first. But the beginning of the piece, um, it's like this very tense feeling that comes through the music, and almost like you have to pay attention to every little sound that comes up in the piece. And um, so I found it like, yeah, when I listened to this piece, I had to really focus and hone in on the sound in the way you were describing. So maybe we could listen to a little bit of it. We have a few excerpts of it because the piece kind of goes through a couple different
Well, it has
styles. But
the movements. Yeah. Actually,
yeah,
before we play this, Adele, do you want to talk a bit about what this first movement is about?
Yes, sure. It's called Shurale. It's a monster of Tatar folklore.
mm.
So it's like a monster who lives in the woods and scares people with the sounds it makes. And it plays some games with you, just hiding and appearing. So you kind of see it and then you don't, and you try to catch it, to follow it, and then you go deeper to the woods and then you get lost. So children would hear those stories, and that's like
Don't go.
a story that makes them like, don't go deeper,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
listen to your parents and be with us. Um, so yeah, but
Um, so is this is you singing, and is this with the USC orchestra?
so actually this one was recorded with New Music Ensemble at the University of uh, Texas at Austin. So, and that was my thesis there,
Mm.
for my master's. So, and they, yeah, played it and
Great.
I sang in it. So,
Yeah.
Let's back this up a little bit. All right.
artists out there, but
I couldn't like. I was like, oh, I can't stop in this build-up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But maybe a first question for that piece would be, you're the one singing on the piece, and there's some really interesting sounds in there. But I was wondering, what changes when you're writing for yourself as a vocalist, or does anything change? Is it kind of different to write for somebody else, and is it easier to write when it's just like things that you feel good doing, you can like write into the piece, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really different. When I'm writing for a singer, I like to listen to them, to see and hear, what kind of music they sing, what kind of voice they have, how the certain pitches sound, with their voice, with their particular voice.
Hmm.
I like to talk to them to know a little more about their personality.
Hmm.
Um, so it really matters to me. And so I try to use their power and their interests, and the colors that I associate with them. So that influences the piece if I'm writing for a specific singer. And then for myself, I feel it's not about like thinking, oh, I can experiment more. It's not about that. It's more of me having fun with my own voice,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Yeah.
like allowing myself to do what I want to do with my voice, and
Hmm.
I feel comfortable with them. The voice is really particular instrument. Uh, it's like your feelings. Your instrument is inside of you, so you really feel if that um, hurts you or anything. If
Mm-hmm.
your
Hmm.
voice, your chords are feeling uncomfortable. So to me, it's important to also, to follow those aspects. And so, and then also when I'm writing for myself, I can check out things right away
Yeah,
while I'm
yeah.
doing them. And then I can
Right.
improvise with my voice physically, like doing different things. And then um, this is my body responding to the idea. Like with the Shurali, it was about sounds, it was about idea, but then just being in that space, I have the experience being in the forest. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's always like trying to hear what's next, and you never know what's next.
Hmm.
And then when
Ears.
you walk, yeah, it tells you about the environment around you, like sound to the left, the sound to the right, the sound
Mm.
above you, and like you, oh, well, it's there, it's here. you know,
Mm.
it's like turning your attention there and here. This is how I imagined the piece and how
Mm-hmm.
I went through the environment that I created in the piece. Um, and like the voice is responding to that,
Yeah.
I would say.
I wanted to ask about how you in a lot of the vocal music that I've heard of yours, you are often writing without text. And for a large range of vocalizations. And I was just curious if that's like something that you feel is like very particular to you, to like exploring your own voice, like you said, sort of having fun with your own voice, because it's not super common in English speaking traditions to have to sing without words. It's like we can say like fa la 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 and like that's it. Um,
And only during Christmas.
and only during so I was just curious if it's if it's something that's kind of particular to you, or if there's some kind of like cultural like commonality of singing without words, where you come from.
So in Tatar tradition, there are always words. And this is how the person tells the story. There is a specific genre where you tell the whole story like through the song. So then the verse is um, all the same through the story, and then the change that you get, that's the word and the story in it, and then you can add ornaments. Um, so the words and the story is important in Tatar folk tradition, but then what it has also in it, the interest to the sound, like those ornaments, they are so cool, they're so beautiful, and they're difficult to make. And so it's about the sound as well. And I guess this is my practice of listening. Uh, Often I start forgetting about the text because my ear is so interested in the sound itself. And so sometimes I forgot about words completely. Like they're there in the song, but I don't hear them anymore. I guess this reflects in the type of work that I do with the voice. Um, and then also a cool aspect in Tatar folk singing, there are sounds in it, like when you make them with your tongue. Like for some of dances, you do like tongue percussion, like at the those kinds of things, and they're not words, they're just rhythms. And so um, and then some specific kinds of like hey who, those things. And so I think I bring up them and focus on them just more, and build up the vocal parts based on those more. And then another aspect, it's difficult to write uh, vocal music based on text. And sometimes I'm afraid of being like too straightforward. Like I don't want to be like, hello, I'm here, how are you doing? Like those kind of things. So
the sun rises and sets.
Yeah, it's sometimes too obvious, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. And what I'm thinking also, studying voice, doing voice major, it's difficult to sing words. You change the vowels, the shape of your mouth, like all that stuff. You have to, keep thinking if everything works properly, that you don't get the tension. So I feel when I do this weird sounds, I don't have as much tension, and I can focus on the sound, and not like thinking, oh, how everything is moving around. Keep thinking about that and this, and keep in mind this about the word. So I can focus on sound. And I guess this is just my approach, that I like really thinking about the timbre of the sound itself.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't get to this in the bio, but you did start your studies in undergrad, studying the voice in Russia. Is that correct? And
yes.
like later on, sort of came to, or later on studied composition in the university. But I wonder if, like, I know we were talking offline a little bit about this notion of like what's healthy to do with your voice. And some of the sounds that you're doing in the piece kind of sound really intense or like kind of charged. But you're saying that in a way, though, they're really natural to your voice, or they don't take a lot of. It's kind of like the tension is gone, actually. But I wonder like how you deal with that, because this piece seems like it's supposed to be sort of like scary, or almost there is supposed to be tension. And I guess just artistically, how do you balance between these kind of intense sounds that are supposed to be scary, but also like not hurting yourself as a vocalist or not like going, I guess, beyond like what's comfortable for you? Or do you feel like that's part of the process, is like finding stuff that makes you still comfortable, but it can get you that kind of like tension or intensity to the sound?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I feel even they sound intense or they have that quality of tension, they're still really comfortable for me to make. And I am really glad I studied voice, because when I make them, I also think about the air. I think about like releasing my jaw, all that jazz from studying voice. So, and like to use your like head sound as well, rather than having the tension on your chords. So, for instance, the sound at the beginning when I do this, I guess you call it fry, throat singing, or
Yeah, vocal
fry
fry.
tone,
Yeah.
vocal fry. Yeah. So it's like something that I practice when I want to release, like when I want my jaw to be released and drop down, and the voice to have some rest and get away the tension. So I do that when I warm up, actually.
And yet it sounds
So
like just like creepy, like creaking,
Yeah.
like zombie noise.
yeah,
It's great. Yeah.
actually, it's a good sound to make if you want to, to get away all the tension
Yeah.
and to make yourself comfortable. Or those inhale sounds as well. I don't do them as a screaming way in a bad scenario. I'm not using like my throat, or I don't get like any tension. It's more of inhale and then air and then head sound into it. And then if you do that for a long time and you try to sing a melody, that's the issue then, because it gets harder and you get so much air uh, in that can dry your voice, or like, yeah, it's not like good to use for singing a whole section or something. But for one sound, it's pretty okay.
Yeah.
And I never had like, oh, that felt painful, Um, and also, oh yeah,
Go ahead.
oh yeah, I wanted to mention like I always was scared to sing high pitches, and then like during my studies, I knew which pitch I am going to sing. I have like perfect pitch, and
Yeah.
so like I before even singing it, I would feel like, oh wow, that's like high A,
Yes.
and that was making me like, yeah, being scary. And here I use it in an opposite way. I use those high sounds, and I use them with straight tone, and I don't think about like, oh, I need to do so much volume and like break out the walls in the hole. I just think about the sound itself, and like enjoying it more rather than making a big sound, which is helpful for vocalists as well. Like, don't think about like trying to make a big sound. Just make a natural sound for yourself, and then through the time it will get stronger, just because you sing it more and more, and you get to used to it. Like, not afraid of being like just the sound itself, just the pitch itself. So yeah.
I wanted to play another little segment from the second movement, Sock and Sock, just as sort of more examples of your like the wonderful sounds that you make
Mm.
in this piece, but also to sort of lead into some questions about like folk tales and myths. Let's pull up. I think it's at 5:41. I also I feel like it wasn't very loud. I can't really make it much louder, I don't think.
I can try over here, maybe.
Let's see. So this movement is about these brothers who were turned into two birds. I think it said the bird of the night and the bird of the day, and they can only call to each other in like the twilight and in the early morning. And so there's like a very clear like narrative aspect. You can very clearly hear these two calling to each other through this movement. And I was wondering that both nature and myths are very common themes in this piece, and even I guess I listened to another piece. I don't remember the name in Tatar, but it was like a mermaid piece.
Oh yeah, so honesta.
And I was just curious like if you like if you just like grew up like hearing a lot of like myths and legends and things like that, or if this is something that's sort of a recent interest.
Yeah, that's exactly what I used to hear growing up. Like hearing those stories from my grandma. We were spending a lot of time together. She was like babysitting with us, with me, with my siblings. And so she would go with us to the park or to the woods, like real forest. And she would tell those stories to us there. And, she would even repeat them next time, but she would say them different way. It wasn't like memorizing a poem. So she would go and tell them again, like maybe adding and making up some details to it herself. And yeah, that was really in our family. And then me, like myself, I spent so much time with her, talking about her life. Like she was telling all the stories from her childhood, and even those legends. Like she would say, you know, uh, don't shake your leg under the table. Like when we would have a meal together, like a dinner. So kids, like to like what's the word? Like kicking their
Yeah.
feet. And like she would say, like, don't do that. A monster will come out and like will get you. Like she would tell us those things. And not because she didn't like us doing that. She grew up hearing from her parents. They were saying those to her, like, and they were beliefs, like in the villages and stuff. So they really thought something would come and get you. Um,
And it also just
so
happens
she,
to make people stop doing something annoying.
yeah, it wasn't just, stop doing something only. It was really like, or don't do a specific thing. This thing may happen, where she would tell like, oh, I had a dream and I saw a water, and it's a bad sign. Like, I don't know what's going on to happen. And like, she really believed in those. So yeah, I really grew up, really, I don't know, being in the world
Mhm.
that maybe do not exist. But anyways, and then I was taking like a class. I was going. I went to a school for children with disabilities, and so there I was taking a class where a teacher was telling us some stories. We even read them, and they had like a interesting setup there with fake food, like made up of um, like a plastic. And so we would like try even to stage those in a way, like, or tell the story to the kid. Like, it wasn't just, having the books in our hands and formulating reading about stuff. So yeah, it was more like our body involved as well. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. Anyways, that's
Yeah, yeah.
some kind of.
It makes me think we could maybe look at another piece too called Bulgar. Because one thing I find striking about the work is the way you create almost like environments and like almost ecosystems of sound. And maybe we can play this little clip and kind of talk about that a little bit. We were going to look at Bulgar around like minute 2 or so. We can pull that up. And this is the recording on Spotify. Is that with who are the who are the performers on this one, Adele? The Bulgar.
Yeah, this is by Thornton Symphony. Donald Crockett is the conductor, and then Nina Shaker is playing the cry part. She's a soloist. So.
And one of our previous guests.
Former guest on Haut Bois Talk Show. Cool. We could take a listen. So
I love,
much.
you know, I
Yeah.
love cutting in between the like quiet solo and then the just like this like awesome chaos.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So much to talk about in it.
yeah.
Um, I was gonna ask, like, just on the note we were talking about before, like, how do you put together all these layers? And um, in the score, it's often like people kind of repeating things, but um, being able to improvise in a way. And I was just wondering how you put together a big like set of like this environment, of people playing. How does that work, like in your process of writing it?
Um, the way I build up the sound itself, I often think about the spectrum, if it's like tiny sound or a big sound.
Mm.
Um, so that's one of the aspects. And then I often think about um, how I can make something that would allow the performer to have some fun and like involve them.
Mm.
um, and so for this big sound, it's so loud, it's so chaos, but the way it is organized, as I said, it is based on the spectrum. But then at the same time, it's like everyone is doing something, and like it's so loud that you can really try to have the fun with it, uh, and not really like there is no way to hide yourself in a way, but
Mm.
then you are going to be hidden at the same time.
Mm.
And to be heard, you have to like really involve yourself, like, oh, um, I need to contribute. And so let's like just get wild.
Mm.
um, but then it's about making something together at the same time, um, in um, playing the game,
Mm.
I guess,
Mm.
like passing things to each other. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. Because it feels like so, I guess, detailed and intricate. Um, and there's so many layers to listen to and deal with, but each of them feels like they have really strong clarity to them, like the way you want to talk about them. Like I was reading one part, and it's like the kurai part, the solo part is supposed to sound like it's almost speaking or crying, and that kind of like specificity to each line and like thinking about um, every behavior that people are doing in this larger texture as being really like uh, carefully detailed and defined. I just think that that comes across in the way that these big textures come out. Is like we're supposed to feel this environment and have like all these different pieces that have such strong character to them. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. I think about the character often,
Mm.
not just, oh, I'm going to get this type of harmony.
Yeah, yeah.
If I go to the individual part, I always think about the character, what
Mm-hmm.
that is really talking about, or what that is exactly in the piece, like not just the adding thing, it's
Mm-hmm.
the character still.
Can you talk a little bit about the kira? How do you say the instrument? I'm a simpleton.
Kurai.
Right. How do it like?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about it? And I think, do you have some behind you? Is there? No. Okay. It looks like you have little flutes behind you, but
They are, they are.
um,
I have different ones there. It's like some of them they're Indian flutes, and some of them are kurais, and then I have penny whistles, and they're really similar to each other.
Mm.
Like 6 holes, tuned differently, just depends on the
Mm.
length. And then the material, the Indian ones, they're made of bamboo. The Korea have one of them is metal, another one is a wooden. And for this piece, I especially ordered a wooden one.
Mm.
Uh, so some time ago, like a few years ago, I bought a wooden one in Bulgar. That's a town where I went multiple times. And so that was more like a toy, but then it didn't work well.
Yeah.
Mm.
But at the same time, I liked that because it didn't make a perfect sounds and it
Mm.
was getting some noises. And just to feel the actual wood in your hands, like the wooden material, also is really cool feeling. It gets warm and like
Mm.
has a nice wooden smell. So I decided to order a better quality one, like an actual instrument, not the toy one. Um, and that's wooden. It's um, not as like practical to use, it's like fragile.
Mm.
The instrument is like the walls of the instruments are thin, but I like the way it works, the sounds it makes. And I ordered like a lower one. It's not like the common one tuned in G. More common ones are tuned in D, a fifth higher.
Mm.
So again, I wanted to have a lower sound and like a little like more difficult to make the sounds from,
Mm.
um, and to have more air sounds in it, like noisy stuff. So yeah, and for this piece, I did improvise on the instruments,
Mm.
like just again having fun and having a character to it.
It sounds like it's fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
How was working with Nina on like teaching her how to play the instrument, because she's a very good flute player, but it's obviously a very different thing to play a a wooden penny whistle basically. Um, how was sort of like teaching her and working with her on it?
Oh, she was just incredible. She got the things right away. But I just was showing to her. I feel um, I, of course, described the way it works in the score, but I feel there's no better way just than sit together
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
make those sounds together. So I was showing her a lot of them, and Nina also was coming up with some suggestions. And that was interesting, like first hearing sounds that I did myself and then hearing her doing them. And she added the character to it. Like, and I like that. I really like that it becomes belonging to a performer who's
Mm.
performing it at the time. But then those things that I came up on the instrument, they are natural to it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There is no like any scale playing and making your fingers uh, run fast or like
Yeah.
it's more about your voice and your body and like um, it's like artistic playing. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
like a technique. It's being artistic and again bringing up the character. Um,
God, and Nina does such a in those quiet melodic places. She played so sweetly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those sections too, I was wondering if you could talk about the form, because in those sections on top of the page it says like jumping to the past or jumping to the present. So I think like the present's when she's playing those sweeter melodies, but then the past is like this really jarring sound. And I was just wondering if you could talk about the form, like how you created that portion of the piece, And if you're thinking like that often about like shifting time scales or even like going back to the past, back to the future, that's a movie, but jumping to the present and the past, if that's something on your mind and how you're doing it in the piece.
So I think this came from my experience visiting the place. You know, we all have the connection to the past. We have memories, and then we have the present. And sometimes that happens to us naturally, like to me. As I say, like I'm outside, I'm talking to people, and then my train of thoughts go to the past. All of a sudden, like hearing something like that triggers me to think about the past, and that's different because the memory works different than the present, obviously. And so visiting Bulgar to me is about thinking the past, and I just really felt there that connection. And the city itself, it's interesting. Like it's modern, but then it has this archaeological stuff happening there, and people keep livestock in the village near to it. It contains all the stuff from the past, more modern, not modern ones, and then it's such a wide open space. So yeah, it really made me to like, oh, I'm next to my family member, and then all of a sudden I think about the past, my own memories, or just thinking about those generations many centuries ago.
Because Bulgar is
So,
the history of Bulgar is very important to Tatarstani culture. Is that correct? Or?
Yes, it's one of the first settlement. So the Tatar people settled there in 10th century. And so, yeah, they have artifacts from that time even in the museum of Bulgar. Yeah.
I was reading in your program note that the city itself is kind of like part museum and part city, slash part village where, like you said, people keep livestock. Seems like a very, being in America, there aren't a lot of places with a lot of really old locations, like really old buildings and things like that. So I can't even, I can't even imagine visiting somewhere that, has that much, like, that much history above the surface, so present.
Yeah.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's cool how you captured that, I think, within the piece, like just imagining like the thought process that you go through as you're in this place, and how you can, through the music, kind of show us that sort of like transporting in your mind, like thinking about the past, all the history of a place, and then snapping back to the moment that you're in, and there's something, yeah, like really that's built, like the way that one section we played shows, it kind of narrates that feeling, and it can be kind of jarring to be pulled like back and forth between thinking about the place and its history, but then also just experiencing and feeling what it's like to just physically be there. So I feel like that moment of the piece captures that really well. So,
thank you.
Bunch of compliments. Yeah.
It can be uncomfortable. We wanted to play a little bit of this piece, Bathing Sun Photons, that you wrote last year. You had a busy last year. There were so many pieces on your website that were written 2020. I was like, wow, that's good job. I wasn't able to do that.
Claps.
This was one of the commissions with through I always get this wrong. Gabrielina Frank, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think.
Yes,
Um,
Creative Academy of Music gig through COVID.
and let's just listen to a little portion. This is for the bassist Austin Lewin and soprano Ali Smither.
Yes.
This is the most exciting part of the stream. Tamsin finding the right spot.
We'll get that.
Gosh, it's so many goosebumps from Ali Smither. Wow, she's like sounds like a wailing trumpet, like up on the top there with that like really wide, wide trill vibrato. I don't know what like. ah, she must have been really fun to write for. She's super good. I was wondering, being a project, specifically designed to do commissions for artists during COVID, not being able to perform regularly, how was writing for this project?
So yeah, they're a married couple, and I talked to them before I started writing the piece because, as I mentioned before, I really like to get to know better the performers that I'm writing for, and so the piece is inspired by them. Like Ali, she's so shine and like sunshine giving person, and so energized. And so I also did listen to her performing. So she's like really kind of, yeah, as I said, energized all the time and being excited. And then Austin has this calm character and like the character of kind of thought and quietness and deep thinking. Like,
Mm.
so yeah, first of all, yeah, the piece was inspired by them a lot. And then the piece belongs to them. Because if you look to the page, there is no that much explanation in it. Like the sound that Ali is making, like,
Mm.
so it's like if you would notate that somehow, it's not the way. I just said to her, like, do whatever you want with it. Like, whenever consonant you want to use, and whenever loud or quiet you want to do it, just listen to Austin, and like Austin listened to what Ali
Mm.
is doing. And so um, and they really took it. Like, they really had their own input into the piece, and it would sound really different with different performers, I think. um, and yeah, I wrote the piece kind of fast,
Mm.
just because they really made me to be inspired for this sounds, and like the techniques, yeah, that I'm using. They're really about giving them the freedom, um, and thinking about each other in the piece, like what's happening with the other part, and how my sound can involve and arrive from the sounds of uh, my performer next to me.
Mm.
Yeah. It's really beautiful that you like work in that opportunity. You know, I'm sure it's like I was just thinking about as like being a married couple during COVID, being quarantined together, like how much they may not want to be spending time together. I'm sure this was like a really fun thing, you know, like just like a fun, creative, like sunny, kind thing for them to put together. It's a good way to treat this this project, I think.
Yeah.
I think we should.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say? Sorry, I interrupted.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah, I also lost you for some seconds.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think now we may take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the novel Zuleikha together. So we'll be back in around 5. And yeah, see you in a sec. right, and we're back. We're here now to talk about the novel Zuleikha by Guzel Yakhina. Um, Maybe we can start by saying, Adele, you're the one who suggested we read the novel. What were the reasons that you wanted to talk with us about the novel? Like, what speaks to you about this book?
Um, so my mom first read it. Um, she first read it, and so like, oh, you should read it, you should read it. And then she told me what that book is about, and I was scared to read it because I, of course, for sure knew it's going to be intense. But then she said, like, you may better understand your grandma and lives of her parents, her family. So, and that really was, I read the book, and yeah, it's often sad to read the book, but then it really spoke to me, and like the life of my grandma, it is not like um, uh, similar to the story in the book, but she lived in that period of time, and she had struggles. Like the book is about some suffering and going through things, and um, it talks a lot about the relationship between mother and the child, the family. And so this is really is about my grandma and my mom. So yeah, and then when I read it, I felt, yeah, um, it's something that mm, isn't foreign, or um, I wouldn't say unfamiliar, but I felt really like I imagine these people, I know them in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So just to sort of briefly explain, the book is, and I, full disclosure, I've, I'm only to like, I think I'm in chapter 5 or chapter 6. And, but the sort of general situation is we're following this woman, Zuleikha, who is a wife of a Tatar woman who is wife of a land-owning peasant in the beginning of Stalin's 5-year plan. And so um, they are taking possession of kulak. The term is like kulak's land, and basically exiling um, the kulaks, basically the highest tier of peasants, which there's there's a lot of talk about how they need to learn to do hard work, but we spend the first chapter listening to how Zuleikha does nothing but hard work all day.
Yeah.
But they are exiled to a gulag in Siberia. So it's very, very intense, and from the Guzel Yakhina, just uh, the veracity of her description of the places and the people really, like, actually Adele said when we were talking offline that like you can't think about anything else. You have to be there when you're reading this book. Um, One thing that came up in our conversation before the break, when you were talking about your grandmother telling you these stories and telling you not to kick your feet under the table, or else or else monsters are going to get you, and I immediately thought of some of the scenes in the earlier on in the book, in the sort of the village life of Zuleikha, when she's praying to, and giving offerings just to like the cemeteries to do something on her behalf, and the the way that those kinds of those kinds of beliefs really are present in that life. And I was sort of, I felt like, I wondered if you felt kind of, you thought of your grandmother when you were reading those passages.
Yeah, I really did.
Mm.
Yeah, as I said before, my grandma would say those kind of things. And that was interesting to me, like now thinking about that's interesting. They are Muslim, but then at the same time they think about
Mm.
the scriptures.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and in a way it's cool, like it's connection to the nature, to the place,
Mm.
and like giving, it's not just a place, it has the owner, a little creature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like one of the spirits is like the edge of the town spirit, where
Yeah.
it's like it's really interesting because it's like she gives an offering to the edge of the town spirit to talk to the cemetery spirit
On her behalf,
on
because
her behalf.
of the cemeteries.
Yeah, and yeah, just this like world that this woman inhabits and how she's like found her way to like exist in it and kind of like try to manipulate these things that she really has no control over,
Yeah.
And that's what I found like really striking and intense about the first part. So I read the first part, which is like the first three chapters, which is the point before Zuleikha ends up in the being taken by the government to these camps. And um, the beginning has such a strong world that's created, like
Yeah.
not just with the imagery, but also with just her preoccupations, like what she cares about, how she prays to, um, how she prays to Allah, but how she also wants to like give offerings to these spirits, and how she also has like a name for her mother-in-law. She calls her the vampire hag,
Yeah.
and like all these, just like this really strong sense of person and her world, and yet there's so many ways that within it strong violence happens to her and kind of seems to get worse and worse to the point where she like is taken to the camp, and it's just really really vivid, and yet the way it's written, like she has this mysticism about like how she feels her life goes, and it's not as if she feels, I don't know, like helpless in it. It just feels like she's finding peace in her world, or like describing like really intense stuff, but she's found a way to deal with it through these like spiritual practices. Um, anyway, yeah, I don't know. It felt like the beginning was really a cold a cold story.
Um, it also sort of struck me that there's a few times in the first part, a lot of it is sort of a grueling description of the work that Zuleika has to do, and how physically exhausted she is after, through the day, and how like there's a few times where she's on a sled with her husband driving it, and she falls asleep on the sled because it's just so nice to sit down.
Hmm.
And beyond, after she's taken away, she spends spoiler alert, she spends 6 months sitting on it, like in like a prison car and a train. um
Mhm.
and I find that like it's really indicative of the way that the hardships that she faced in her in her village life. She is able to sort of contextualize into the tradition of what a woman should be in a family. And then once all of that is stripped away from her and she's given this one thing that she really wanted during that time, like the chance
Hmm.
to sit, the way that the way that the current political situation in the government has almost no way to interface or to relate to the traditions of her previous life. Like it just, you know, that time feels like everything has to get thrown away, you know. So the price of her getting to sit down was having to have the rest of her life being thrown away. As I sat here, I listened to the audiobook while I was working on the computer. So I'm like sitting here on my ass listening to her do all of this grueling work and then sitting on a train. It was I was very preoccupied even when I wasn't listening, you know, listening to the audiobook of this. Like I was thinking about her and what was going to happen to her, like for a lot of this week. I'll have you know. I love that you asked us to read this. It's so intense, but it's been so long since I've had to like read a novel. You know, I feel like being in school, you're always, you know, reading some article. You know,
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I was wondering, Adele, if there's like certain scenes that are really meaningful to you. I think offline we've talked about a few, but like if there are things that were like, I don't know, like strong moments that you remember from the book. And you can give us spoilers. It could be like stuff that we don't know yet.
Something that I noticed through the book, I think it's the relationship between a mother and a child. Like the first one is this mother-in-law and her son. Then even animals like a horse and baby horse. It's like cute, but then at the same time, it's another layer of it. And it starts right at the beginning. And then Zuleikha lost her four children. They were dying just after they were born. They were too weak. So like the imagery of broken egg at the beginning, it's like a tiny scene. So Zuleikha is trying to hide their savings, like the food, that it won't be taken away. And so she holds an egg, and she got scared of something, and so the egg is broken. So it's like a life, beginning of life, you know, and that's broken. But then later on, she has in her hands these seeds left from the so they decided to hide some seeds that they were planning to plant in the spring to you know, eventually to have bread. So they're like hiding it, and few seeds left on her skirt, and she finds them and she's holding them. And that's about like life and growing, and she survives at the beginning of the book. And so I feel it's about also giving a life and surviving. I just see so many signs of it in the book. And like the end of the book, the real drama for Zuleikha, like at the beginning, she is almost like a bird, like doing just the duty, and she's just doing things physically all the time. And as Tamsin said, then she got to sit and listen to and like observe, and that reflects the title of the book. Like Zuleikha opens her eyes, you know, before she was just physically doing things. And so she opens her eyes and sees things around her, and gets to know the world. Even us, like at the beginning of the book, you cannot tell what period of the time that is if you just don't know the dates. Like it might happen in, I guess, even 12th century or something, and then it's a 20th century. And so she opens her eyes and sees more and more things. And she's suffering at the beginning a lot, and then later on. But the biggest suffer for her, the pain, that's when she allows her son to leave her and go to study to a different city. And that's the opposite to her mother-in-law, who wanted to possess her son, like having him always around, and like being also mentally in his thoughts and everything. And Zuleikha does opposite. And if she would choose for herself, she would make her son to stay with her in that settlement. But then the opposite she's doing, she allows her son to go. And like reading the book, I guess when Tamsin will get to that part, that felt for me like one of the biggest drama, like because her son was the window to the world for Zuleikha. He was everything for her, but in a good way, because she loves him so much. She does good for him, not like for her. And as I said, like my family, like my grandma, my mom, it is a little different about them. Like my grandma was more toward that conservative culture, when things were told to their children what they're supposed to do, what they should do for their life, those kind of things. And then my mom really gave us the freedom to choose what we want to do, and I'm very thankful for that. And like with Zuleikha, I understand my mom a little more, like her allowing us to go to places, to leave her often alone, like physically. And so that was interesting to me to see in the book, like for Zuleikha, the biggest pain of her life and the biggest decision she made, the most effort she put against her, that was allowing her son to go leave her, and allowing him to do what he wants to do for life. And yeah.
I'm looking forward to that, because I'm actually, the place that I stopped was like immediately after she had the baby. So like I haven't even, he isn't even a real person to me yet in the novel. But
we'll have to keep reading. It feels like there's so many loops in the book of like, because I remember you were telling me too that at some point she kind of looks back at her mother-in-law and understands some of the things that she was fearful of with her son. And it feels like these recursive or like recurring theme of like nurturing, but like what level of nurturing is good. And it feels like Zuleikha is also like learning how to nurture and see herself in a larger picture as the piece goes on. But I'm very grateful to have read the beginning. I gotta find time to get to the rest. It's an intense read, I will say. Like there's some really intense scenes in it, but it feels like I think, as all of us have said, it's like you kind of have to keep reading. Like when you are starting to read it, it's like I can't not think about. I can't like I'm like in that space, So so go read it, everyone.
Go read it. Yeah. Gosh, sorry, I was gonna say something. Just sort of, I'm wondering if there's some kind of sort of relationship between this sort of theme of mother and child and the political situation, as far as like the sort of like very paternal, heavy-handed government, that'll be something that I'll probably try to pay attention to, because
it's interesting how like the book is. I think Adele, you and I were talking about it offline. Like it's not explicitly a political book, but it is almost like incidentally about the things that happened in the government because they affected her life so drastically. And it was so surprising, I think, in the beginning because it's like Zuleikha's world is like set up really vividly and really intricately, like all these different like psychological things she's holding in her mind, like her spiritual life, her husband, her mother-in-law, and then suddenly the government comes in and kind of like squashes all, like suddenly she's put into this completely different world. And I stopped right there, so I want to continue to figure out like what's that next step. But it really feels like, as opposed to this being about politics, it's really just like showing the aftermath of it and the decisions of someone we don't even really spend too much time thinking of, at least in the beginning, and finding the aftermath of that and her life really like being overturned by some of these larger political things. So it balances, I think it balances in an interesting way, or maybe skews toward the personal. But like, that's always already political, but like, it's skewing to the personal to express why all of this actually matters. So, yeah.
And you can see in the character of the commandant, he's constantly the man who's like in charge of the the prisoners as they're being taken to Siberia. The way that he has this constant battle of very much believing in the party and the political project, but day after day after month of seeing these people and getting to know them, having a hard time, having a hard time seeing the, like, truly being involved in the personal with these people and still trying to conceive of them as the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's really, it's so up close and personal that it's hard for, I can feel his convictions being shaken. Yeah. But we should probably wrap up. I just really like this book.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing it with us, Adele.
Yeah.
So keep reading.
I can't wait to see you. I hope you'll be around in the fall. It'll be great to see each other in person.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks again, Adele. And yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks for another show. We'll make a trailer video, I'm sure, to tell you who's coming in 2 weeks. But yeah. But thanks
so
again
much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your work. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye.